Hi there, this is Ron Rogers, and I am going to talk about flaps on the 727, or what is commonly referred to as disassembly of the wing, and my experience when I first saw this in actual operation. And another thing I'm going to talk about is the Krueger flap. Now, this flap it resulted from an issue that the Comet had of wing stall at high angles of attack on rotation, and it resulted in an accident. So the purpose of the Krueger flap was to generate lift at high angles of attack, and it first more or less made its commercial appearance over in this country on the 707 and then the 727, and you could see it on various other aircraft up through the 747. But the 777, they kind of cleaned up the wing, and I'll show you some stuff and talk about that a little bit, and some of the progression of some of these types of flaps. Now, you're probably wondering, what did Eddie Krueger have to do with flaps? He was more of a horror movie guy, but I look at this one cutout and I go, yeah, look at that hand there with the yellow arrow there. That looks kind of like it could be a flap-like structure. Well, I tried to find out who this guy was, so I looked up some pictures, tried to get some pictures of Krueger. Well, first of all, it's not Eddie Krueger, my mistake. It's Werner Krueger, and it's got the umlaut over the U. So I know I'm not pronouncing that correctly, and my son would correct me on that very readily. But I know the guy on the left is probably not Werner. The guy on the right could be, but I tried to find a picture of him. Maybe somebody has a picture of this guy. But basically, he developed the Krueger flap back in 1943, and he was a German engineer. Now, I'll talk about the Krueger flap in just a minute, but one thing interesting on the 727, this is a picture of the Fowler flaps, and Fowler flaps are really cool flaps. And the two arrows, the yellow arrows, point to the jack screw. Now, this is a little screw that's run by a hydraulic motor, and if you set on any of these Boeing aircraft and the flaps are coming out, you hear this whir, 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 whir. This thing kind of runs on forever, because you can see it extends quite a ways out there to extend these flaps. These things are pretty amazing. Now, of course, you're sitting there, you're cruising along, and normally you do a flaps 5, flaps 15 takeoff, and the flaps look fairly normal there. Back in the day on the 27, Max Blast flaps 15, when I was an engineer, that before fuel became more of an issue and stuff like that, that was the takeoff. That's what captains did. Max Blast flaps 15. But anyway, you're cruising along, and the wing looks fairly nice. Now, these are actual pictures I took on my very first flight on a United Airlines 727 back in 1967. Of course, we're cruising along there, and the wing looks fine. But the next picture is they start to extend the flaps, and it's kind of, oh my gosh, this was really interesting. I'd never seen anything like that. Now, this is a picture of me on the left, geeky me, going out to the International Science Fair. That's why I was writing on the 727 with United. I took a DC-6 out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa to Denver, which is kind of interesting. And then we walked up the air stairs on the 727, went Denver to San Francisco Airport, which was a lot different airport back then. Little did I know that I would fly all 3 seats in that airplane I initially started out riding on, and become a United Airlines pilot for 37 years. That's me a little bit later on. Now, talk about flaps in general. We have just the plain flap, and it's just plain like vanilla, not like airplane. It's plain flap. And then we got the split flap. Now, the plain flap you got on and I'll show you the picture here, on a 172, but the 172 actually might have a little bit of a slotted flap, a little bit airflow can get around there. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at it a little closer. I haven't flown a 172 for a while. But then you got the split flap. That produces lift but a lot of drag, and that's what I've got on my 310. And then the slotted flap, where they get the airflow to re-energize and give even more lift over it. Then you got a simplified version of the Fowler flap there, the initial one, where it comes back. And of course, what you typically have on the 727 down there is the double slotted Fowler flap. Now, basically, the Fowler flap on a 727 gives you a 20% increase in wing area with an 80% increase in lift. These things are effective, and I'll show you some pictures and you can understand why when you see them. And here's your typical 172 flap, and this is a dash 80 flap, which is, this aircraft was developed off of the DC-9, of course, and the flaps were much more simplified back then. You know, the original model of the DC-9, I think the dash 10, dash 15, I know the dash 10 did not even have leading edge devices. And here's a picture of the 727, the flight control services. And you've got the leading edge flaps there, the Krueger flaps, as they're called. And then you've got the leading edge slats. Now, most of you people are going, well, I thought flaps were on the back side of the wing and slats were on the front. Well, okay, we'll get in that in just a second, because they're putting flaps on the front side of the wing here. And just for the fun of it, here's the hydraulic system that's used. The A system typically activates most of the function of the flaps, and you have backup systems in case of emergency. And for those of you who fly light airplanes, you'll like some of the speeds here in the gray out. You know, you put flaps 2 down at 245 knots, and the flaps 40, you can put those down up to 175 knots. Now, with a lot of the noise things, they locked out the 40 flaps. But when I was flying as captain on this, we did not have the lockout, and I many times use 40 flaps in snowy, slippery conditions, because they really help you slow down, stop. And one time it was funny. I had an engineer. We're going into a blizzard in Albany, New York, basically, and the runways, they can't keep up plowing with them, so it's slick. And I said, we're going to do a flaps 40 landing. And she says, we can't do those. And I go, yes, we can. I'm a captain on this airplane. I'm a line check airman. We can do 40 flaps. Trust me. And there's this little silence. And then she came back. She looked it up and goes, okay, you're right. I guess nobody wants to do flaps 40 because they're scared of them. And the key on flaps 40, I'm slightly digressing here, but the key on flaps 40 is you don't pull the power early. Although, if you have enough extra speed, you can actually pull the power a little early on a flaps 40 and actually get a nice landing. Some people will probably disagree with that, but I've done it. Anyway, they generate a lot of lift, but a ton of drag, and they'll stop you very nicely if you've got braking considerations that you need to, take account of. And of course, here's a picture of the Fowler flaps there, and you can see how far these things extend. It's really amazing the amount of surface area and the angle these things come down. And here's a picture of the Fowler flaps again, just a little bit farther out. And here's a picture of the slats on a 727. They're in the outer portion here. And now here is the Krueger flap. Okay, this thing always amazed me. Coming out of the Air Force and stuff like this, the size of this thing, the position, and the way it extended was just amazing. Now, like I said, now it wasn't this guy, and it wasn't due to his hand there. But here's kind of a little thing about the Krueger flap. And I downloaded a German paper. I couldn't get a lot out of it. I was kind of looking for a picture of Werner Krueger, but they had several people, but he wasn't there. But I guess it was used on a number of German experimental aircraft and other aircraft during the war. But basically, the Krueger flap extends differently than the slat extends. And to me, this thing just looked like a big barn door hanging out there, and I was surprised the thing actually works well. But it does work well, and again, there's the picture of it. And here's a picture, you'll recognize that Delta paint job there. The yellow arrow points to the Krueger flap, and the green arrow points to the slats on the wing of the 727. And there's another slightly different view of it. And here, the flight spoilers and ground spoilers. The flight spoilers are the outboard ones. The ground spoilers are the inboard one. And by ground spoilers, I mean when you touch down to try to kill off all the lift. And of course, if you're a passenger on the aircraft, and there's the outboard, mostly outboard flight spoilers and the inboard ground spoilers, but it's amazing how you can really kill the lift off the wing once you touch down. And sitting back as a passenger, you can, I can look through the wing. Yeah, to me that was always a little disheartening when you landed and you could actually go, I can look through that. I can look through the wing. That's kind of unnerving, but I guess the engineers know what they're doing there. And of course, I want to make one mention about the 727 on takeoff. Now, we had a model of it. I don't think a lot of airlines had this. I think a lot of them were a lot smarter than us. But we had what was called the stretch, which is basically the standard 727 that had the JT8D engines, and they just stretched it. They made it longer. They made it increase gross weight, stuff like that. Well, this, I had captains who told me as engineers that they should have never certified this aircraft, and its performance was truly, truly marginal. Here's a picture of the old Denver Stapleton. Now on 35 left, there's a road down there and a bridge, and I'll show you a picture here. But if you take off on 35 left, you'd get roaring over that road as you were going down the runway. And if you went to the right, you'd just taxi over it kind of normally. But I used to, anybody who's been around Denver for a long time, I mean, this is all torn down now, but anybody who's been there remembers the highway going under the road there, and aircraft going over the top of the road there. But I have taken off out of Denver in some of the old 737s and also the stretch 727. One time the captain, he was a bit of a cowboy, started singing "Rollin', Rollin', Rollin'," from Rawhide. So I just joined in, and we're singing "Rollin', Rollin', Rollin', keep them doggies rolling." And of course we had a lot of time because we were just rolling forever. And we later said, well, we hope there wasn't an accident because they would hear that on the CVR. And probably wouldn't come off as the most professional takeoff, especially if we had an accident. But yeah, okay. Now on the 777, well, they kind of cleaned it up here. They got rid of the Krueger flaps and they made them just kind of full leading edge slats, and that's an absolutely beautiful wing there. But one thing that always amazed me was the extent that the flaps extended. Now, these are 30-degree flaps. The largest flap setting we had on the 777 was 30 degrees. Now, to me, boy, that looks almost vertical there. But these things generate a lot of nice lift. And they are big. That's one of the test flights I was on. That's me with the blue arrow there. That's me before it was certified. This is back in '94. And there's with the yellow arrow, you can see the picture of how far the flaps come down. And there again is the picture on approach with the flaps extended on the 777. And of course there is the takeoff at a much lower flap setting. Now, just for interest, this is the A380, and you can see a little more simplified, just a straight Fowler flap there, not the double slotted or anything. And of course, when the spoilers come up, you can see right through the wing there again. So anyway, that is a discussion of the flaps on the 27 with a few little, extra airplanes thrown in there. So I hope you found it interesting, and thanks for watching.